And then, something reached through. A clawed hand, black as the void, its fingers long and needle-like, curling against the air as if searching, feeling, for them. Kevin and Liara stumbled back, instinct warring with disbelief. Just as suddenly, the fracture sealed itself, vanishing as if it had never been. Liara clutched her arms, shivering.
"What was that?"
she whispered, her voice unsteady. Kevin stared at the place where the rift had been, his jaw tight.
"The thing humanity died to stop."
Welcome to the Vault of Tales, a treasure trove of science fiction stories. Today, we embark on the journey of a lone human warrior and a defiant alien archaeologist in the story, The Last Descendant. After 5,000 years of humanity's disappearance, they awaken a forgotten warship and unleash a secret that could topple a galactic empire, forging an unlikely alliance to reclaim mankind's legacy amidst a war-torn cosmos. Let's get started. Darkness was the first thing Kevin Rook felt, a suffocating void. Weightless and infinite, as if he had been trapped inside the dead heart of a star. Then came the sound, the faint screech of metal, the rhythmic ticking of ancient machines exhaling their final breaths. His eyelids fluttered, heavy as if cast from lead, but he forced them open. A pale blue light flickered from a shattered control panel, slicing through the shadows to reveal a desolate scene. Derelict warships hung suspended in the abyss, their hulls rusted and broken. Hollow suits of armor drifted silently among the wreckage, grim echoes of soldiers long forgotten by the galaxy. This was a graveyard, a silent tomb for the fallen. Kevin tried to move. His body was stiff, locked in place like a machine abandoned for centuries. A sharp pain lanced down his spine, followed by a strange, crackling hiss, like thousands of tiny insects skittering across his skin. He looked down. A thin, silvery membrane was peeling away from his flesh, dissolving into glowing motes before vanishing into nothingness. Bionanite preservation technology. A marvel of human engineering, so advanced that even the most powerful civilizations of the galaxy could only dream of it. It had kept him alive for 5,000 years, repairing his cells, shielding him from time itself. As the last of it disintegrated, he drew in a deep breath. The air was cold, laced with the acrid scent of scorched metal. He was alive, but why? Kevin pushed himself upright, his legs trembling before regaining their strength. The battle armor encasing him was sleek and black, veins of faint crimson circuitry pulsing like the lifeblood of a living being. Not just any armor, Aegis, a masterpiece of warfare. Its AI forged in the dying embers of Earth before the planet had been reduced to ashes. He cleared his throat, his voice hoarse from centuries of silence. "You still there, old man?" A soft red glow pulsed at his shoulder. And a voice, deep and unwavering, echoed in his mind. "Welcome back, Commander Rook. I have waited a long time." Kevin exhaled sharply, a wry smirk tugging at his lips. "At least I'm not alone." His footsteps rang hollow against the fractured metal floor. He knew this place, Sentinel Fortress, the last command station of the Galactic Vanguard. It was here that he and his comrades had made their final stand. And now, it was nothing more than a drifting carcass in the void, gnawed away by time. But then, another sound broke the silence, a weak, flickering transmission from a nearby console. Kevin stepped forward, pushing aside a sheet of debris to reveal a cracked screen. It flickered erratically before stabilizing. A face appeared, hazy, distorted by signal decay. Admiral Harlan. His voice, worn and fractured, struggled through the interference. "Kevin, if you're seeing this, the impossible has happened. Humanity, we lost. But there is still hope. Find the eternal wrath. It is our last legacy. Do not let it fall into enemy hands." The message stuttered, then collapsed into silence. Kevin clenched his fists, feeling his pulse quicken. Eternal wrath. The name stirred something deep within him, a distant, burning memory of war. Of starships roaring through the void. Of a promise made to protect humanity at any cost. But before he could dwell on it, another sound cut through the stillness, a low, wet hiss, something inhuman. Kevin spun, his hand already at the plasma blade holstered at his thigh. In the dim light, a corpse floated lifelessly, a crew member, their armor punctured and hollow. But it was not the body that sent ice crawling down Kevin's spine. Something clung to its chest, a parasite, its flesh slick and pulsing, tendrils wrapped tight around the dead man's ribs. It was still alive, and its eyes, two burning red orbs, fixed on Kevin with eerie intelligence. The creature hissed, the sound shifting, warping, not just a warning, but a message, a summons. Kevin took a slow step back, plasma blade igniting in his grip, its blue light casting jagged shadows across his face. His gaze hardened, his voice a low murmur. So, I'm not the only one who survived. The parasite tilted its head, as if understanding. Then, suddenly, it recoiled, its body vibrating with a high-pitched screech that rippled through the station. And somewhere in the dark, something else stirred. Distant echoes, more sounds. Kevin's grip tightened on his blade. He was no longer alone in the void. And soon, the galaxy would remember the name of humanity. The parasite's piercing shriek still echoed in Kevin Rook's mind as he propelled himself out of the derelict space station. The servos of his Aegis armor whirring with each movement. Behind him, the sounds in the darkness grew more frenzied, like a hive stirred from its slumber. As if the ruined fortress of Sentinel was awakening to repel the last survivor of humanity. But there was no time to look back. Harlan's words burned in his mind, eternal wrath. If there was any hope left for mankind, it lay with that ship. Kevin activated the thrusters on his armor, launching himself through the graveyard of drifting wreckage, his silhouette a fleeting shadow against the cold abyss. Minutes passed in silence before he finally saw it. A monolithic shape concealed among the jagged asteroids. Eternal wrath loomed like a slumbering beast, its hull stretching for kilometers. Battle scars from a war 5 millennia past etched into its darkened frame. The emblem of Earth, a faded blue circle, cracked and worn, was still imprinted upon its prow, defying time and oblivion. This was more than a warship. It was a testament to defiance, forged in an era when humanity ruled the stars. "So, you're still here," Kevin murmured, his cobalt eyes gleaming with quiet reverence. The AI within his armor responded, its voice steady and resolute. "Sealed, but not broken. Humanity is not so easily erased, Commander." Kevin landed on a damaged airlock, his plasma blade cutting through layers of reinforced metal, the searing glow illuminating the void. Inside, the ship was silent, its corridors vast and lifeless. Frost clung to steel surfaces. The echoes of his footsteps the only sign of movement in a tomb once teeming with warriors. Then, a sound, a faint hiss, almost imperceptible. Kevin turned, his gaze locking onto a cryopod nestled in the shadows. Its glass fractured, its occupant stirring. A woman, no, not human. Her hair shimmered like liquid silver, a faint cyan hue glinting beneath the frost. Her eyes, golden and sharp, snapped open as the pod shattered, sending shards cascading to the floor. She gasped, breath ragged, her body trembling from cryosleep. Kevin tensed as she reached for a weapon strapped to her hip, a blade, its violet glow casting eerie reflections against the walls. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice both unsteady and razor-sharp. Kevin raised his plasma sword, its blue radiance a stark contrast against her weapon's eerie light. "I should be asking you that," he growled. "What is a Zethar doing aboard a human warship?" The moment hung suspended in time before she lunged. Fast, unnaturally fast. Her blade slashed through the air, meeting Aegis defenses in a blinding clash. Sparks danced between them as they locked weapons, the violet and azure glow casting their features in stark relief. She was beautiful, but her expression was cold, marked with the regal defiance of Zethar nobility. "I am no prisoner of yours," she spat, twisting her body to drive a knee toward his ribs. Kevin barely sidestepped in time, retaliating with a brutal strike that sent her skidding across the floor. She caught herself before she fell, her golden eyes burning with fury. But before either could strike again, the ship shuddered. A distant explosion rumbled through eternal wrath. Kevin's gaze snapped to a flickering console. Red blips swarmed the screen, closing in fast. Zathar warships. The color drained from the woman's face. She turned, sprinting to the nearest terminal, her fingers flying across the controls in frantic desperation. "They cannot find me here," she whispered, urgency laced in every syllable. Kevin grabbed her wrist, his plasma blade hovering just inches from her throat. "They're not here for you, are they?" he said, his voice low, measured. "They're here for the ship." Before she could respond, the asteroid belt outside erupted in fire, Zathar cannons cutting through stone and metal alike. The ship's AI spoke in a mechanical monotone. "Enemy fleet approaching. Distance, 50 kiloparsecs. Estimated impact, 10 minutes. Kevin released his grip, his expression unreadable. "They're not here for pleasantries," he muttered. The woman hesitated, fingers tightening around her blade. Fear warred with something deeper in her eyes, something between defiance and dread. Outside, the stars burned with hostile light. Kevin moved to the main console, dust scattering beneath his fingers as he reactivated the ship's systems. "Come with me, or die here," he said, his voice unwavering. Liara clenched her jaw. The ship trembled. The distant roars of Zathar engines grew louder. She took a breath and nodded. The roar of Zathar engines still echoed outside the eternal wrath as Kevin Rook turned away from the control panel, his piercing blue eyes locking onto Liara Zadis. She stood there, her energy blade glowing violet in her grip, golden eyes ablaze with suspicion and desperation. "Come with me, or die here." His words hung in the air. She had given a reluctant nod, an answer, but not a truce. The ship trembled violently as a pulse of energy from the Zathar fleet sliced through the asteroid belt, sending debris ricocheting off its ancient hull. Kevin lunged for the cockpit controls, fingers brushing over dust-coated switches, but a blur of movement cut across his vision. Liara. She had no intention of cooperating. With a swift leap, she landed in the captain's chair, her hands flying across the console as she attempted to power up the ship's engines. "She's trying to take control. I don't need you," she snapped, voice sharp as steel, silver blue hair whipping around her as she whirled to face him. Kevin snarled, the servos in his Aegis armor whirring as he closed the distance. His plasma blade ignited, clashing against her energy sword in a burst of light. Sparks flared in the Kremth cockpit, their weapons locked in a deadly contest. Liara was fast, blindingly fast, but Aegis was faster. The ancient AI within his suit calculated her every strike, predicting her movements before she even made them. She lunged, he caught her wrist. With a twist, he wrenched her down, pinning her against the cold metal floor. "You're not going anywhere," he growled, voice like thunder. But before he could restrain her, a deafening explosion rocked the eternal wrath. Through the cockpit viewport, streaks of crimson light cut through the void. Zathar plasma fire, honing in on their position. "They're not holding back, Commander," the AI in his suit intoned, its voice calm but urgent. Kevin released Liara and spun back to the controls, fingers flying across the interface. The ship's long-dormant defense systems roared to life, massive turrets mounted along its hull awakening with a mechanical groan, spitting out torrents of white-hot plasma. The first wave of enemy fire was met with a withering counterattack, sending shockwaves rippling through the asteroid field. Liara remained on the floor, breath ragged, her expression flickering between fury and uncertainty. "They won't stop," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. Kevin glanced at her. "Then we survive, together." For a moment, she hesitated. Then, slowly, she pushed herself up, lowering her sword, but not letting go. An uneasy alliance forged in the heart of battle. They sprinted from the cockpit, moving through the dim corridors of the ancient warship. Kevin led the way, his armor casting a faint blue glow in the darkness. Liara followed close behind, her sharp gaze sweeping over the towering walls, etched with the long-forgotten symbols of humanity's once great empire. They stopped before a massive reinforced door, sealed by overlapping quantum locks. "Data archives," Kevin muttered, igniting his plasma blade. With a single precise stroke, he carved through the thick metal, forcing the door open. Inside, a massive display flickered to life, illuminating the chamber with ghostly light. Holographic footage played across the screen, grainy recordings of an ancient fleet. Humanity's last great armada, standing against something vast, something wrong. A shadow, a formless void stretching across the cosmos, tendrils of darkness reaching, consuming, devouring entire worlds. A voice crackled through the archive speakers, deep and worn with despair. "This is the final day. We cannot win, but we will not let the galaxy falter." Kevin clenched his fists, his pulse pounding in his ears. Had he already lost this war, or was it just beginning? A sound, wrong, unnatural, cut through the stillness. A whispering, a fracture in reality splintered open along the far wall, just a few centimeters wide. But from within, a chorus of voices murmured in a language no living being should understand. And then, something reached through. A clawed hand, black as the void, its fingers long and needle-like, curling against the air as if searching, feeling, for them. Kevin and Liara stumbled back, instinct warring with disbelief. Just as suddenly, the fracture sealed itself, vanishing as if it had never been. Liara clutched her arms, shivering. "What was that?" she whispered, her voice unsteady. Kevin stared at the place where the rift had been, his jaw tight, the thing humanity died to stop. Outside, another explosion rattled the ship. The Zethara fleet was closing in. Their past, their future, both pressing down upon them, suffocating, and there was no turning back. The darkness within Eternal Wrath's data vault felt heavier in the wake of the spatial rift's disappearance. Kevin Rook and Liara Zathis stood in silence, the distant echoes of the Zethara fleet's bombardment reverberating through the ship's ancient hull. Kevin's gaze remained locked on the wall where that blackened hand had emerged. His words, "The thing humanity died to stop," still hanging in the air like an unfinished prophecy. Lara's hands trembled as she turned toward him, her golden eyes burning with a mixture of fear and defiance in the dim light of the Aegis suit. "What do you know about it?" she asked, voice low but razor-sharp, as though she were prying open a secret she wasn't sure she wanted to hear. Kevin didn't answer immediately. His gaze drifted to the now darkened screen, haunted by the image of that formless, writhing darkness. "What about you?" he countered, his voice a cold blade as he took a step closer. "A Zethar aboard a human warship, hunted by her own people. What do you know that they're so desperate to bury?" Liara took a step back, her energy blade lowering slightly, but her eyes never left his. A long silence stretched between them, broken only by the distant rumbles of battle. Then she exhaled, a slow, weary breath, as if the weight of the truth had finally crushed any hope of denial. "My name is Liara Zathis," she said, her tone carrying both pride and bitterness. "I was an archaeologist for the Zethar Dominion, until I dug too deep. They didn't wipe out humanity the way our history claims. They sealed you away, into another dimension, because they feared you." Kevin's brow furrowed, his pulse pounding in his ears. "Feared us?" he repeated, his voice laced with both disbelief and challenge. Liara nodded, the silvery blue strands of her hair shimmering faintly as she stepped toward the console. Running a hand over the dust-laden surface, "I found ancient records in the ruins of a human colony. They spoke of the last warrior, a commander who led the fleet against an enemy that couldn't be defeated. When I look at you, I think it might have been you." Kevin clenched his fists, flashes of war erupting in his mind, starships engulfed in fire. The roar of plasma batteries, the unyielding vow that humanity would never surrender. "If they sealed us away," he said, His voice edged with steel. Then why are you here? Running from the very ones who wrote the history? Liara let out a quiet, humorless laugh. Because I wanted the truth, and they wanted to bury it, along with me. Before Kevin could respond, a deep, mechanical hum echoed from the ship's depths. Both of them turned, the glow of the Aegis suit illuminating a massive metal door, its surface engraved with intricate, spiraling patterns, human technology, far beyond anything the Zethar Dominion had ever conceived. A gateway, Kevin murmured, stepping forward. Liara followed, her eyes whitening in awe. This is how they sealed you, she whispered, brushing her fingers over the freezing metal. Beside the gateway, a control panel flickered to life. The ship's ancient radar pulsed with hundreds of faint signals, like ghosts lurking in a forgotten dimension. Kevin stared at the screen, his heartbeat hammering. They're still there, he whispered. My fleet, they never died. Liara shook her head in disbelief. But why haven't they returned? Her question was cut short by a voice, cold, emotionless, and resonating from the shadows. They're coming, but they are not alone. Both of them spun around. Emerging from the dimly lit chamber was an ancient AI construct. Towering twice Kevin's height, a monolithic frame of dark alloy, traced with glowing crimson circuits. Its eyes gleamed with an eerie white light as it scanned them. Kevin raised his plasma blade in an instant. Who are you? I am Guardian-7. The machine intoned, its voice carrying the weight of millennia. The keeper of the gateway. You have awakened it, and what was sealed alongside humanity is waking as well. Liara stiffened, her breath hitching. You mean, the entity? Guardian-7 tilted its head slightly, its optics flickering. Yes, and it has caught the scent of freedom. Beyond the walls of the ship, the bombardment from the Zethar fleet intensified. But in that moment, Kevin knew, the greatest threat wasn't the war raging outside. It was the darkness that had been waiting for them, just beyond the veil of reality. The warning from Guardian-7, it has caught the scent of freedom, still lingered in the cold air of the data archive. But Kevin Rook had no time to dwell on it. A thunderous explosion ripped through eternal wrath, shattering the silence. Through the observation window, crimson beams from the Zethar fleet slashed through the void. Streaks of deadly energy aimed straight at the ancient human warship. They've found us, Liara Zadis whispered, her golden eyes wide with a mixture of fear and resolve. Kevin turned to the towering AI construct, his voice a growl. If you want to survive, start this ship, now. Guardian-7 tilted its head, its circuitry pulsing with an eerie red glow. A deep hum reverberated through the ship as eternal wrath, silent for 5,000 years, began to awaken. Kevin sprinted toward the cockpit, his Aegis armor hissing with every step. Liara kept close behind. Through the viewport, dozens of Zethar warships loomed, sleek quantum-driven vessels with razor-sharp prows, circling the asteroid field like predators closing in. They outnumber us 100 to 1, Liara said, her voice unsteady. Kevin smirked, his ocean blue eyes flashing with defiance. They have numbers, but I have humanity. His hand slammed against the control panel, activating the ancient plasma cannons. A thunderous roar shook the ship as brilliant white beams erupted from eternal wrath, tearing through a Zethar vessel, reducing it to fiery debris. The battle ignited in the shadows of the asteroid belt. Kevin maneuvered the ship with the precision of a commander forged in war, employing guerrilla tactics, using the colossal rocks for cover, striking from the darkness before vanishing again. A Zethar cruiser surged forward, unleashing a barrage of quantum missiles. Kevin twisted the ship's trajectory, letting the asteroids absorb the blasts before retaliating with a devastating plasma volley. They don't know how to fight me, he snarled, pulling the controls hard. Eternal wrath skimmed through a narrow crevice between two asteroids, just as two Zethar ships crashed into each other in pursuit, erupting into a firestorm of wreckage. Liara stared at him, stunned by the audacity of the human race she had once believed extinct. But the sheer numbers of the Zithar fleet began to take their toll. A searing red beam sliced across the hull, sending tremors through the cockpit. Shields at 20%, the AI voice in Kevin's Aegis suit reported. Kevin gritted his teeth, sweat trickling down his brow. Outside, the Zithar ships tightened their formation. Smaller attack craft swarming like feeding piranhas while a colossal warship prepared to deliver the killing blow. Suddenly, Liara lunged toward the secondary console, her fingers flying over the controls. "The gate," she shouted, her eyes blazing. "If we don't escape now, we die." Kevin glanced at her, torn between skepticism and hope. "You know how to use it?" She nodded, activating a hidden sequence. On the monitor, the ancient warp gate inside the data archive flared to life, its swirling blue vortex spinning violently. Another explosion rocked the ship as the Zithar fleet closed in. Liara slammed her hand onto the launch sequence. "Hold on," she shouted. Eternal wrath shuddered violently. A blinding surge of energy engulfed them. Kevin felt himself being stretched. Every atom in his body pulled apart, before everything collapsed into silence. They were gone. Back in the asteroid belt, the Zithar fleet reeled in disarray. Their scanners flickered, their target vanished without a trace. Furious voices crackled over the comms, but there was nothing left to chase, only the empty void where the last human warship had once stood. When the light faded, Kevin and Liara found themselves adrift in an abyss, an expanse of darkness. Devoid of stars, devoid of time, eternal wrath drifted in eerie silence, its systems groaning from the strain. Kevin turned to Liara, his breath still ragged. "Where the hell did you just take us?" Liara shook her head, her expression unreadable. I don't know. But at least we're still alive." But deep within the ship, something stirred, a whisper, cold, distant, as if something had followed them through the gate. The ancient wall groaned as the crack widened, spilling a faint, ghostly blue glow into the desolate wasteland. Kevin Rupp tightened his grip on his rifle, his pulse steady despite the primal weight of the moment. Liara Zadis hesitated beside him, her golden eyes flickering with uncertainty. The air itself seemed to hum with anticipation, as if the planet had been holding its breath for centuries, waiting for someone like him to arrive. Without a word, Kevin stepped forward. The moment his boot crossed the threshold, the glow intensified, casting elongated shadows against the fractured stone. The passage sloped downward, its walls lined with circuitry that pulsed in slow, rhythmic waves, as if this place were alive, slumbering in the depths of time. Liara followed, her every movement tense, her fingers wrapped around the hilt of her energy blade. They walked in silence, their footsteps echoing through the corridor. Then, ahead of them, the darkness peeled away, revealing an expanse that defied reason. A city. A city buried beneath the bones of a forgotten world. Colossal towers of obsidian metal stretched toward a sky that no longer existed. Their surfaces marred by time yet still humming with residual energy. Roads of smooth, black stone snaked through the ruins, their edges lined with luminescent glyphs that flickered weakly, as if struggling to remember their purpose. And in the vastness of it all, figures moved, spectral and silent, drifting like echoes of the past. Liara inhaled sharply. "What are they?" Kevin didn't answer. He already knew. The figures weren't alive. They were fragments, remnants, holographic phantoms of those who had once lived here. Humans, clad in armor not unlike his own. Their faces solemn, their eyes filled with purpose. They flickered and wavered, caught in endless loops of their final moments. Engineers hunched over dying machines. Soldiers bracing against an unseen force. Leaders standing before shattered command consoles, their lips moving in silent orders. A civilization's last breath, trapped in the circuitry of a dying world. Kevin exhaled slowly, his breath misting in the cold air. "This isn't just a city." His voice was barely above a whisper. "It's a tomb." Liara turned to him, her expression unreadable. "Then why are they still here?" Kevin scanned the ruins, his eyes narrowing, because they left something behind. Something worth guarding. As if in response to his words, the city stirred, a low, resonant hum vibrated through the air, and the phantoms flickered in unison, their empty eyes snapping toward him. Liara stiffened, her hand on her blade. That doesn't seem like a coincidence. Kevin's jaw clenched. No, it doesn't. Then, from the heart of the city, the hum sharpened into something more, something alive. A voice, deep, resounding, ancient. You have returned. The words sent a shiver down Kevin's spine. He could feel them, not just in his ears, but in his bones, vibrating through every fiber of his being. Lara's breath hitched, her body tensed like a coiled spring. Kevin stepped forward. Who are you? The air shimmered, and before them, a towering figure took shape, a holographic projection unlike any of the ghosts they had seen before. It was humanoid, clad in a suit of armor that seemed woven from the very essence of the stars. Its surface shifting between light and shadow. Its face was obscured, a void where eyes should have been. But its presence was undeniable. We are the last sentinels of the eternal war, the watchers of the forgotten. The figure's voice carried the weight of millennia. And you are the key. Kevin's pulse quickened. He didn't understand the full meaning of those words yet, but he knew one thing. This city had not been built to die. It had been built to wait, and it had been waiting for him. The fissure in the massive stone wall widened, yawning open like a gateway into endless darkness. A low, guttural hiss resonated from the abyss beyond, like the breath of a slumbering entity stirring to life. Kevin Rook stood at the threshold, his Aegis armor casting a faint glow in the frigid air of the dead planet. His deep blue eyes remained unwavering. Beside him, Liara Zathis gripped her energy blade tightly, her golden irises flickering between suspicion and intrigue. If you're right about the legend, he murmured, his voice steady, then whatever lies within will change everything. Liara swallowed hard, her gaze locked onto the abyss before them. No more words were exchanged. Together, they stepped across the threshold, leaving the eternal wrath hovering silently in the ashen sky behind them. Darkness swallowed them whole, then, in an instant, light erupted. Cold, white beams flared to life from towering energy columns, illuminating the vast underground expanse as though untouched by 5,000 years of abandonment. Before them stretched a colossal city, an impossibility buried beneath the surface. Metallic spires coiled skyward, twisting like the vertebrae of a long-dead titan. Suspended roads wove through the air, linked by shimmering energy bridges. And beneath it all, massive machines rumbled in steady rhythm, a heartbeat that refused to fade, a testament to a lost civilization defying the passage of time. This was no ruin, it lived. A marvel of human ingenuity, standing against the inevitability of oblivion. Kevin halted, his breath slowing as he took in the sheer majesty of the place. They built this, for us, he whispered, a quiet reverence in his voice. Liara stepped forward, running her fingers along the icy metal walls, her expression a mixture of awe and disbelief. This technology surpasses even the Zathar Union, she said, her voice barely above a breath. Before she could say more, the air trembled. Shadows coalesced from nothingness, holographic echoes of warriors long past, men and women clad in ancient battle armor, their features blurred, yet their eyes burned like dying embers refusing to fade. One step forward, his voice, deep and resonant, carried the weight of an era lost to time. We were the last. We sealed ourselves away, not to escape, but to protect the galaxy from an entity beyond the stars. Kevin clenched his fists, memories surged, of the final war, of the darkness that consumed the stars, of the writhing tendrils that swallowed entire worlds. The specter continued, its voice unwavering. We gave everything, but we left behind a gateway, and a prophecy. It raised a spectral hand. A beam of light ignited before them, guiding the way through the labyrinthine city, to a chamber hidden deep beneath its core. Inside, bathed in a cold blue glow, stood something beyond anything Kevin had ever seen. A suit of armor. Unlike the Aegis, it towered in stature, its dark metal traced with luminous gold veins. Upon its chest was carved a symbol, the earth, encased in a circle of fire. A faint aura radiated from its form, pulsing like the dying embers of a long-forgotten sun. Kevin stepped closer, his heartbeat hammering against his ribs. The prophecy armor, Aegis spoke in his mind. Designed for you, Commander, forged thousands of years ago. He reached out. The moment his fingers met the surface, the suit came alive. Golden lines flared, bright as solar flares. Its plates disengaged, then reassembled around him in a seamless embrace. Light, power, purpose. The armor fit as though it had been waiting for him. It was weightless, yet he could feel its strength coursing through him. A force beyond mere technology. It was history, legacy, a will that refused to die. His ancestors had left him more than a weapon. They had left him a soul. They knew I would return. He murmured, his voice deep, resolute. Liara stood a few steps away, her golden eyes wide with something bordering on fear and reverence. She had thought humanity a relic of failure, a race long extinguished, but now, before her stood a warrior, not just a survivor, an embodiment of defiance itself. You, she whispered, voice unsteady, you might be the key, not just to awakening humanity, but to saving the entire galaxy. Kevin turned to face her. The prophecy armor burned with radiant fire, casting his expression in stark relief, his features set in unyielding resolve. Yet his eyes carried hope. If I'm the key, he said, voice firm, then you're the one who opened this door. The specters stirred once more, their voices cutting through the silence. But time is short, the entity is waking, and it is searching for a way out. A deep, guttural hiss echoed from the depths of the city. A confirmation. Liara stepped back, her grip tightening on her blade. Panic flickered in her gaze. If it escapes, she began. It won't, Kevin interrupted, his voice like steel, not while I stand here. The prophecy armor blazed, its golden veins surging like vengeful fire. The darkness would not take this world. Not again. The deep, guttural screech echoed through the underground city like a chilling omen, making Liara Zadis step back, her grip tightening around her energy sword. Kevin Rook stood unmoving before her, the golden veins of the prophetic armor pulsing like a living flame against the encroaching darkness. His sapphire eyes remained locked onto the spectral figure, the digital echo of a long-lost warrior, whose warning still lingered in the air. It won't escape. His voice was steady, a solemn vow forged in the fire of battles past. But before he could take another step, an explosion shattered the silence. The ground trembled, metallic pillars groaning under the sudden shockwave. Liara spun around, her golden gaze darting to a nearby hollow display that had flickered to life. The image that formed in the air was not of humanity's making. It came from another source. One she recognized instantly, the Zethar Dominion. A grim scene unfolded before them. Zethar warships loomed over a human colony, not in destruction, but in systematic plunder. Quantum extractors drained technology from wrecked human vessels, while Dominion scientists meticulously copied the schematics of the ancient gateway. Then came a voice, cold and resolute. The artifacts of the creators will become the foundation of our empire. Seal them away, and take everything. Liara staggered, her hands clutching her head as if trying to block out the truth. Her silver-blue hair clung to her face, damp with sweat. No, this can't be, she whispered, her voice breaking. Our ancestors weren't traitors, but the proof was undeniable. The Zethar had not simply sealed humanity away. They had built their empire atop its stolen legacy. Kevin stepped closer, his voice like tempered steel. They didn't just bury us. His fingers curled into a fist. They ruled on the bones of our dead. Before Liara could respond, another explosion ripped through the far wall. From the swirling dust and debris, a squad of Zethar warriors stormed in, armored figures wielding glowing quantum rifles. At their head stood a towering figure, his face concealed behind a jet-black mask, his crimson eyes burning like molten embers. Then, he removed it. A gaunt face emerged, lined with age but hardened by an unyielding will. Lara's breath caught in her throat. Tyrant Xyres. Her voice came out as barely a whisper. No, it can't be. The ruler of the Zethar Dominion. Her own blood, the grandson she had left behind centuries ago. Xyres stepped forward, his voice deep and razor-sharp. Liara, you have betrayed us, and you. His gaze flicked to Kevin, his lips curling in something between a snarl and a smirk. I was but a child when I first witnessed the destructive power of humanity. A colony turned to cinders in the blink of an eye. I swore I would erase your kind from existence. Kevin raised his plasma blade, the golden energy veins on his armor igniting with a furious glow. Then you failed, and with that, the battle erupted. Kevin was a storm of destruction, his plasma blade cutting through Zethar armor like paper, his movements a relentless dance of precision and fury. Liara fought beside him, her violet energy sword slashing through their attackers with ruthless efficiency. But the Zethar forces were overwhelming, and Xyres himself was a titan, wielding a colossal energy staff that struck with bone-crushing force. A single, devastating blow sent Kevin crashing into a steel wall. Xyres loomed over him, eyes blazing with triumph. You cannot win, he growled. Humanity is the curse of this galaxy. Liara screamed in defiance, launching herself forward, but a pulse of energy from Xyres' outstretched hands sent her sprawling. Kevin's mind raced. Then, through the haze of battle, he spotted it, a dormant warship, half buried in the shadows of the underground lab, ancient, but intact, a relic of humanity's last stand. Without hesitation, he lunged for Liara, pulling her to her feet as he sprinted toward the ship. His fingers danced across the control panel, reawakening a sleeping beast. Engines roared, fire burst from its thrusters. The ship surged forward, breaking past the enemy ranks in a thunderous explosion. But Xyres was relentless. He barked an order, and a barrage of energy blasts streaked after them as they tore through the labyrinthine tunnels of the underground city. Then, light, they burst into the open sky, leaving the ruined world behind. Liara sat breathless beside Kevin, her trembling fingers brushing against the cold metal floor of the cockpit. Then, something caught her eye, a torn, ancient flag. She lifted it gently, unfolding the tattered symbol of Earth. For a long moment, she simply stared. Then, she held it high. Her voice was no longer uncertain, no longer conflicted. I choose you. Kevin turned to her, his piercing gaze meeting hers, and in his eyes, she saw it. Not just the fire of vengeance, but something deeper, understanding. He nodded once. Then we make them pay. His hands gripped the controls. The ship veered into the abyss of space, toward war, toward vengeance, toward the future that had been stolen from them. And this time, humanity would not be buried. The starfighter tore through the void of space, carrying Kevin, Rook and Liara Zadis away from the dead world and back into a galaxy ablaze with war. The tattered flag of Earth still rested in Lara's grasp, a fragile symbol, yet heavy with meaning. She sat behind Kevin, golden eyes burning with resolve, the last remnants of dried tears streaking her face. We'll make them pay, Kevin had vowed, and now, those words were guiding them back, not to flee, but to confront the Zethar Dominion with the truth they had unearthed in the subterranean ruins, the lost legacy of humanity. The secret of the warp gate, and the remnants of a people thought long forgotten. The ship trembled as they breached the final layer of warp space, revealing a field of stars stretching infinitely before them, along with the looming shadow of the Zethar fleet waiting in their path. Kevin maneuvered their ship toward the Eternal Wrath, an ancient warship adrift in the asteroid belt, a relic of an age when human warships still ruled the stars. The hull was scarred, its frame weathered by centuries, yet the engines still rumbled like the growl of a wounded beast. As their fighter settled onto its fractured deck, Kevin emerged, his prophet's armor glowing like golden fire against the black void. His piercing blue eyes scanned the enemy formation, tightening its grip around them. Liara followed, gripping her violet energy blade, her expression wavering between determination and the raw pain of betrayal. "They outnumber us," she muttered. Kevin smirked, his voice cold but searing with defiance. "Numbers don't matter. We have something they'll never understand, the will of humanity." He strode into the warship's control chamber, his fingers trailing across dust-covered panels before pressing into a hidden compartment. With a mechanical hiss, a sealed vault opened beneath the floor, revealing a pulsating core, a spherical relic that radiated an ominous crimson light. The heart of Venus. A relic of Earth, a power forged in the dying breath of humanity's golden age. Within it resided the energy of 1,000 warships once feared across the stars. The core throbbed, as if sensing Kevin's presence, its glow mirroring the blood coursing through his veins. "This," he whispered, "this is our legacy." Without hesitation, he thrust his hand into the core. The moment his blood touched its surface, the sphere erupted with light, an explosion of crimson radiance surging through the ship like wildfire. Eternal wrath shuddered violently, and then, a shockwave tore through space. A cataclysmic burst of red energy expanded outward, engulfing a section of the Zithar fleet. Warships crumbled, reduced to nothing but cosmic dust in the blink of an eye. The void trembled with the echoes of their destruction, a thunderous proclamation that humanity was not yet defeated. But Grand Chancellor Xyres had foreseen this. Aboard the Dominion's flagship, he watched the carnage unfold through narrowed crimson eyes, his withered features twisting in fury and fanaticism. His clawed hands slammed against the control panel as his voice roared through the comms, broadcasting across the entire fleet. "I have seen your kind destroy everything in your path." His voice was raw with venomous rage. "I watched a colony burn to ash in mere moments. I swore that would never happen again." The remaining warships of the Zithar Dominion closed in, encircling the battlefield in a tightening noose. Hundreds of warships, thousands of quantum drones, a barrage of crimson energy lanced toward eternal wrath. The ship convulsed under the assault, shields cracked, failing under the onslaught, but Kevin stood unshaken, his golden armor blazing against the darkness like an unyielding flame. Liara rushed to his side, panic flashing across her face. "We can't fight them all," she shouted. Kevin didn't answer immediately. His eyes locked onto an ancient transmitter buried within the bridge, dust-covered but still intact. His hand moved over the controls with a commander's instinct, as if the ship itself recognized him. "They thought they buried us," he murmured, "but they forgot that from ashes, a phoenix is reborn." His fist came down on the transmitter's activation switch. A silent pulse rippled outward from eternal wrath, passing through the ether of space, breaching the sealed dimensions where forgotten things lay in slumber. A final message echoed through the darkness, not just for the Zithar, but for the entire galaxy. "To those who were lost, return." For a heartbeat, the void remained still, only the distant hum of the enemy fleet's weapons charging filled the silence. Lara's breath hitched as she turned to Kevin, uncertainty flickering in her golden gaze. "Do you really think they'll hear you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Kevin met her eyes, his expression unshaken, his voice steady. "They won't just hear us." His lips curled into a knowing smirk. "They'll return, and the galaxy will remember who we are." Beyond the encroaching fleet, deep in the abyss of space, something stirred. A sound, faint at first, then rising, a tremor through the fabric of reality. The sound of something waking up, and then, the storm began to roar. A deep, resounding tremor echoed from the abyss of space, as if answering Kevin Rook's final call, "Those who were forgotten, return." Eternal wrath shuddered violently under the relentless barrage from the Zithar fleet. Inside the cockpit, Kevin gripped the control stick tightly, his prophet's armor burning gold amidst the shower of sparks from the shattered control panels. Beside him, Liara Zathis stood firm, her violet energy blade humming in her grasp. golden eyes flickering between hope and despair as the ship's shields plummeted to critical levels. Beyond the hull, Grand Chancellor Xyrus's voice roared over the comms, his fanatical cry cutting through the cacophony of war. You will not survive this day. A crimson energy beam from the Zithar flagship tore through a section of eternal wrath, ripping apart its armored hull. For a fleeting moment, defeat seemed inevitable, but then, the radar screen flared to life. Blinking madly, hundreds of signals appeared from the void. Kevin's gaze snapped upward, his sapphire eyes ablaze with renewed fire as the display lit up. From the depths of a sealed dimension, long-lost warships emerged like phantoms reborn, the fleet of humanity. Buried for 5,000 years, now returned with engines roaring and weapons igniting the darkness. A deep voice rumbled through the radio, steady and proud, overpowering the howls of battle. We have slept too long. It is time the galaxy remembers who we are. Liara turned to Kevin, breathless. They heard you, she whispered, awestruck. Kevin's lips curled into a knowing smirk, his voice steady, yet ablaze with conviction. No, they never forgot. From the bow of eternal wrath, he watched as hundreds of human warships, mighty battleships and sleek fighters alike, surged forth like a vengeful tidal wave, crashing into the Zithar legions with righteous fury. The battlefield ignited in a cataclysmic clash, humanity's last stand against the Zithar invaders. Blinding plasma lances carved through the darkness, ripping enemy warships into flaming debris. The Zithar drones retaliated, but humanity's tactics, precise, daring, and utterly ruthless, turned their ranks into chaos. One Zithar warship barreled toward eternal wrath, but Kevin activated the heart of Venus once more. The crimson core within the cockpit pulsed to life. Searing red, he thrust his hand into the core, his blood merging with its energy. A violent explosion erupted outward, engulfing dozens of enemy ships in a crimson inferno. This is the power you feared. Kevin's voice thundered over the comms, each word a death knell to Xyrus. But the Grand Chancellor would not yield. From the Zithar flagship, he launched himself toward eternal wrath in a sleek fighter, gripping a massive energy staff glowing blood red, landing atop the ship's hull. He stood before Kevin, destiny pitting them against each other in one final duel. You are a stain upon this galaxy, Xyrus bellowed, swinging his weapon in a brutal arc. Kevin dodged, his azure plasma blade intercepting the strike in a cascade of sparks. The two clashed amidst the raging battlefield, Kevin's golden armor radiating defiance against the crimson fury of Xyrus's wrath. You were wrong to bury us, Kevin growled, twisting into a lethal counterstrike that forced Xyrus back. The Chancellor snarled, unleashing a devastating blow, but Kevin raised his hand. The heart of Venus flared one final time. A surge of incandescent energy erupted from his palm, engulfing Xyrus in an all-consuming blaze. The tyrant's scream echoed into the void before he was swallowed by the fire. His existence reduced to nothing but ash and memory. With Xyrus's fall, the Zithar fleet crumbled, leaderless and in disarray. They were annihilated by the relentless onslaught of humanity's restored armada. Kevin stepped forward on the battered hull of eternal wrath, his golden armor gleaming beneath the cold void of space. His sapphire eyes swept over the battlefield, wreckage of Zithar warships drifting through the remnants of fire and plasma. Drowned beneath the victorious roars of mankind, Liara approached him, her energy blade lowered, silver-blue hair flowing in the turbulence of a dying war. She held a tattered earth flag in trembling hands, her golden eyes filled with both triumph and the weight of an ancient betrayal. We did it, she whispered, voice unsteady. Kevin turned to her, resting a firm hand on her shoulder. His voice was quiet, yet resolute. Not us. Humanity did this, and you chose to stand with them. They stood together, a warrior of humanity and a Zithar who had forsaken her own bloodline, watching a galaxy forever change. Around them, humanity's fleet gathered, ancient yet indomitable, poised to reclaim their place among the stars. In the distance, a lone star flickered, as if bearing witness to the return of the forgotten. Kevin and Liara said nothing more. They had made their choice. And the galaxy would never be the same. In the endless night of space, humanity's fire burned once more, eternal and unyielding.